Hi, welcome to Barefoot English. We are working today with Khan. How are you today, Khan?
I'm good. And
Awesome.
how about you?
I'm good too. It's a nice day. It's kind of cloudy but cooler than right normal, so that's a good thing. Um, we are on the visiting relatives. We did the first question last week, which will be up online whenever these get up online. And now we're going to continue going into the other questions. So I'm going to share our screen real quick, make us bigger for the audience. And there we go. And we're going
Uh-huh.
to close this. Hang on, I got to hide my floating whatever that is for your Zoom meetings. Um, what do you do when you visit them being your relatives? What do you do when you visit your relatives?
Uh, uh, honestly, well, let me think. Um, because I rarely see relatives, so it's so tough for me to talk about what I do with them. So I'm gonna eat with them, uh, like have a family uh, reunion,
Okay.
and yeah, we have a monumental time with each other, and then we'll go to the mountain to climb or like take a picture, and then go to the pagoda to um, do some usual activities like we do every year, and it's so great.
Good, good. I'm glad that you stopped yourself to think for a minute. Sometimes these questions aren't easy to answer. They're a topic that you may not be familiar with or that you don't do that often. So you've got to think about, oh, well, what do we do? Um,
Yes.
yeah, and that's good. That's good that you did that. You started and then said, whoa, 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 let me think. Um, and that was a good move. Um, we will eat a meal together. We'll have a big meal together. We
Uh,
will have
we
instead of
will have,
I eat with them. Or I don't
yeah.
know exactly. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it was kind of in the wrong. Excuse me. It was in. It was a
Yes.
little bit not perfect. Not perfect. It would have been
Yes.
fine as an answer, really, probably, but you could say it better. Like,
Mm.
we usually have a big meal together, right? That would kind of be paraphrasing back to what you do. We usually have a big meal together. That's You could even say that's very common in Vietnam. That's normal. Everybody gets together,
Yes.
you eat, you go and visit something in the area nature wise, you go to the pagoda. Um, and at the pagoda, you could have said we do things like go and say prayers for our ancestors or our things like that would have also been good. Um, Hold on.
Why, why you laugh?
Okay. Because I just I just sent a message to my friend via microphone because my elbow was on my phone, and he said that it made no sense. It came in, it didn't make any sense because it recorded, it just got a little bit of our record of our speaking. So it was funny. And he wrote, he made a comment. I talk about my spell check on my phone, and this is okay for our listeners. They'll probably enjoy this. Um, my spell check is very confused because I switch back and forth between Vietnamese and English keyboard very often, or
Keep,
I get I get messages in Vietnamese and then I copy them to my keyboard. I copy them and translate them.
Ah,
And when it
like
does that, that goes into the brain of your spell check. And so my spell check is we always joke that my spell check has special needs. That it's like special needs is a term we use now for people that have either some kind of mental or physical disability that means they need kind of extra attention, different kinds of teaching. They may not be able to get to the same level as other students. They have
yes.
special needs. Special needs. We used to say when I was growing up that somebody was retarded. We don't say
Retard.
that anymore. We don't use that term. In fact, that's considered like no, don't. So
Yeah,
you
like it's impolite.
completely impolite. Um,
Yes.
Instead, we use the term either disabled um, or impaired, like visually impaired or mentally impaired, um, emotionally impaired. Impaired means that they don't have the full what would we consider the baseline normal of humans. And so anybody that falls below or above that has special needs. And it's not always below it. I want to make that very clear because um, I work with many special needs students, and they
Oh,
are highly capable of learning. They're very
yes.
smart. Most
Mm,
of them are, the majority of them are really like, in some ways, have it even more advanced levels of skills or abilities to understand things that doesn't always play out with what we call the normal baseline, the baseline of humans, right? We learn to speak at a certain time. We learn to read and write. We learn to all the developmental goals are reached. And so that would be a kind of a normal baseline. A special needs student can be below that baseline or above that baseline on some things and below that baseline on others. So there's a balancing act that we play as teachers to try to educate our special needs students as well, and as effectively as the normal baseline students. um, and we got onto that because my spell check, I always say she spends all of her time spinning plates.
spinning
Spinning plates. Okay,
plate.
so there's a we're going to go ahead and discuss this because I want to discuss this, and we'll put this up because it's an interesting topic, and I'll make this up. I might separate it out and cut this in half, giving our first part of this answer and then cutting this out. But I do want to include it. Um, there's a thing called autism. Do you know what autism is?
Autism uh is it uh related to autistic?
Yes, exactly. Autism is um, uh, of so the uh, here, we'll read this one. This is a good one. Um, and I'm just going to make this bigger for our viewers. Hang on, just so they can really um, see this text. So, autism spectrum disorder (ASD) is a
Oh.
developmental disability caused by differences in the brain. It has to do with the neural paths and the way the brain receives information or processes information. Some people with ASD have a known difference, such as a genetic condition. Other causes are not yet known. Scientists believe there are multiple causes of ASD that act together to change the most common ways people develop. And again, all of this is based on what we consider kind of the average or common way people develop. The autistic brain develops differently. In some cases, it and there's what we call a spectrum. Do you know what a spectrum is?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so a spectrum,
Spectrum.
yeah, and I'm going to explain it as well, but we'll look at the definition of spectrum. A band of colors as seen in a rainbow, produced by separation of the components of light by their different degrees of refraction according to wavelength. You understand how light works, right?
Light.
Yeah, and you understand how like a light makes a rainbow.
Yeah. Like
So
seven light.
exactly. It breaks it down into a spectrum of colors. A spectrum of colors. So if you can imagine that there are in autism, there's what's really called kind of non-functional autism. It's the most extreme level. Okay. It's the one where a child who becomes an adult and the behavior, it never changes, it continues through their entire life, really is somewhat non-functioning. They live in their own world in their head, and it's just nearly not impossible, but it's very, very difficult to reach that person. You have to reach them on with a lot of carefulness because their brain somewhat is overwhelmed by the world. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
So you have said that they live in their world in their head,
yeah,
and so they are overwhelmed with everything surrounding them.
correct. And in order to block out the world around them, they do things or they basically do their best to close off the world around them because it overwhelms their brain. So I'm going to explain it like this. Imagine if every single thing that you saw and heard and smelled and touched and tasted all was at the maximum level of information coming in,
Yeah.
meaning you were you didn't just see a green tree, you saw 2,400,000 leaves colored green on branches that made a map of the tree, and the bark, you could see all of the colors and the distinctness of the tree, every knot, every cut, anything that's on that tree, you saw that all at once. And the whole world was like that. Your brain doesn't have the filters to cut down what we see to what's important. You couldn't function, right? You couldn't drive your motorbike if you saw everything at 30 kilometers an hour, because your brain would just be overwhelmed. It would be like too much is coming in. In a way, that's a way to explain autism, that we all have what puts us at that normal level of development, is that we have filters that allow us to block out what we don't need, right? Because we actually see and hear and smell and feel and taste things all the time at a very high level. Like, just our experience of seeing things is, for example, I absolutely cannot stand TikTok. Why? Because it's so noisy and so much information and just constant, and it's fast and it's blah 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 blah. Like I just turn it off, right? I don't want it. I can't deal with that. It gives me a headache immediately, right? In a sense, that's almost, if a certain doctor heard that about me, they would say that I might be on the spectrum of autism.
What?
Yeah, it's possible. It is very possible, because our brains are wired so differently. Everybody's brain is wired differently.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is that there's really a lot of people born now that appear to be on this autism spectrum. That doesn't mean a negative thing. It doesn't at all. In fact, in many cases, it is an advantage, because it means that, well, I might not have a filter that's good at blocking off noise, right? My filter may not be good at that. And for me, that kind of overwhelms me. On the flip side of that, I have a very powerful brain that thinks about things and does it all the time, right? which is one of the reasons it doesn't like to be bombarded by noise, because it's busy. It's busy thinking things out, right? We've talked about this, about the idea that when you hear something, one of the things about the way I teach English is I talk. Why? Because everything that you hear is going into your brain and it will get processed. It won't get processed maybe during the lesson, it's processed later. All of a sudden, 2 weeks from now, you use vocabulary that you heard me use today. Right?
Yeah.
And you do that without thinking about it, because your brain is processing it in the background.
Background.
So going back to our theme, this is a very interesting topic. A spectrum. So if the rainbow is like this, right, with 7 colors, the spectrum of autism starts at one of the levels that's most difficult to deal with, really at an extreme level. And then it moves up to what is a highly functioning autistic person. So we have low functioning, meaning in the normal world that we live in, they don't function well. Okay. Now, remember, that is important. The normal world that we live in, they don't function well. That doesn't mean that they can't function as long as they are in their world. Okay. In their world. And to reach them as a teacher, we have to be aware of that. And in some ways, go to that world and
go to that world.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if we can understand how their brain is working and let our brain work in the same way for that time, we can reach them, right? And it takes time and it takes practice, but and it doesn't always work, but there is a lot of potential to find an area where they do function. Okay.
Yeah. I have watched some videos and I really paid attention to some situation that autistic people are interested in colors, and they are extremely incredible at math, at numbers.
Yeah. That's so that's where it goes. That's where I say it moves from like low functioning to high functioning, or high functioning in certain things